Hello everyone. Welcome to Project Frankaru Part 3. It's time to get into the oil pan. Why? Well, because the next step normally would be to put the motor mounts in. But the motor mounts have to have a new cross member which has to clear the oil pan. And since I'm going to be dry sump and removing part of the oil pan, I need to get that cross member as high as possible underneath the car. Furthermore, I'm going to be putting my steering in back here, right where this deep sump is. That's where the steering rack's going to be. So I can't do that until this is modified. So naturally, the next step is, got to get this oil pan modified. So here's the plan. The windage tray is going to stay in the pan later, and it doesn't go very deep. That's nice. I got lots of room underneath. But that is going to be coming back into the pan. Not going away, factory part going back. Inside the pan, GM did some very interesting things. The pickup, of course, is way down in the sump at the back and is a hard tube that goes up to this point. This right here is an O-ringed inlet to the factory oil pump, which is on the front of the crankshaft. Because of that, there's no separate pickup in there. This is inside the pan, so it's got to go away, and we got to get rid of this because it goes down in the sump. So that's your normal pickup. Your oil filter on a V8s is usually on the left side, and on the V6s, they moved it to the right and put this whole cast arrangement inside the pan. These two are the inlet and outlet ports to your filter. So your oil goes into the filter and back from the filter to the engine. Now, one idea would be to just go ahead and mill off the bottom of these, put some fittings on, put some right angles, and go to my remote oil filter. Problem with that is that this material is too thin. There's not enough inside here to get a good thread in here and have a big enough port without restricting the flow. And so that's just not necessary. There's other options. So I'm leaving that alone. Furthermore, the oil filter would be in the way of my steering. But when they put it on the 6 cylinders, they did it on the other side. And they moved it, as you can see, forward, which is great because now it's in front of my steering system. These two ports are for a remote oil cooler. Now there's a little block off I can get that just reroutes these. It's a bypass that bolts on, and I can get rid of that. I don't really need that for the short runs I make. Plus, I'm going to have a lot of hose and a remote oil reservoir inside the car, which will add to cooling in a separate area. You won't get any engine heat in that reservoir, so we'll get plenty of cooling. We don't really need this. So the first thing that has to happen is we got to remove some things in here. One of the things is, right here, there's a connection, a electrical connection, which goes to the back to a float. This is for people who don't check their oil. It's a float to tell you when you're low on oil. That's going away because the sump's going away. And I have a nice little plug that I machined that's going to fit right in that hole and get welded in. And that will that'll close that up. So that'll be closed off. Okay. Now as for the cutting, I need to go as high as I can at the back of the pan for my steering. And the limit to that is the bottom of this crossover piece here. So the idea is to cut this high up here in this area. We need to keep this at the back. There's 2 bolts that go in here for the engine adapter plate. We need to keep that. Only that much will be sticking down, but we want to keep all these reinforcements at the back and all of that. And so I'm going to cut just inside here up to this point, across here as high as I can, and then I have to stop there because of the oil filter point here. Since the oil filter flange is here, I'm going to leave that alone. And then from this point forward, right where that starts, it's all going to be cut on that same line, straight across here. So this will get bolted to a milling machine upside down and mill all of this off. And for the oil filter, this remote device from Canton, product 22-593, is a remote oil filter adapter. Will screw in here, and that'll run the hoses out the side. Now, is that going to hang down a little? Yes. But my steering is going to be right here, and my cross member is going to be in front of it. So it won't be any lower than that. The filter won't be hanging down, getting hit. So that takes care of that part of the problem. So that'll all get milled off. The original tube inside here comes out. That goes away. Now on this setup, what they have, that goes in the back of this port, and in the front they had a freeze plug pounded in here, a steel plug. Well, I'm going to be replacing that with an aluminum plug that's going to get knocked in and welded in back in there on both front and rear of this, which I'll explain in a moment. That'll block this off in the pan and up here so that I'm not drawing air through there. I took a laser and just laid a line out on here and noticed that where I'm cutting up front here, it's going to take most of this area off, all the way up to here. Part of this will stay, but then there'll be a plate made and all of this will get welded up back together for the shallower oil pan. Inside the pan, the oil is going to flow off of this area into here. The shelf at the back is going to be right under here and then drop down slightly in this area. So the deepest part of my pan will be like right through this area here. And so what I'm going to do is pick up my oil right up front here and here. Got these nice little Joe's Racing Products pickups. These are for an AN12 SAE fitting, an O-ring fitting. And that will go right here and right here. Now, drag racers would think horrible because oil goes to the back of the pan. Not when you're rallying. You're on the gas, you're on the brake, and you're doing a lot of left, right, left, right, left, right. So most oil is going to be right in this area and left and right. So I'm picking up on both sides. And a dry sump pump doesn't really starve. It'll pump air and oil, doesn't care. It'll just keep this going back to the reservoir. So whatever gets in the pan goes to the reservoir. Got a 3-stage pump. This is a used item, but it's a good 3-stage dry sump pump. You have 2 suction points with 1 outlet. That goes back to the oil tank, the reservoir tank. Then you have a return from that tank in here, which goes out to your engine. Well, we don't want to be pumping a lot of oil pressure into the engine because you'd add that pressure to what's in the pump. You're pushing it into the other pump. You can get all kinds of leaks and damages and too much pressure in the engine and all. So to prevent that, we're going to take this, and I'm taking this oil relief valve out, and I'm running it very low pressure. So the idea is that that's only going to put about 5 psi in the engine. Remember, at the factory, it's under suction here. There's almost nothing here. So to deal with that, what I'm going to do is weld these plugs in here, and then I could thread the front of this, but again, there's not enough meat here, not enough material. Plus, there's a bolt right here I need for the oil pan. I would not be able to get to that. I could countersink it, but you still couldn't thread in because there's not enough edge here to get a hold of a fitting. Plus, the lower vibration damper pulley is in here and might get in the way, and then your hoses are hitting that. Just a lot of issues. So to prevent that, after we weld in these 2 plugs, I'll have a lot more meat in here to mill this off and put one of these fittings here. This fitting then will come from the dry sump pump, which will get its oil from the tank and push it in here at a low pressure and pick it up here back in the engine. Very simple. And that should do a really nice job. So the pan's going to get a lot of modifications when you see it again. There's even other little things you have to do. For instance, I'm not going to have a dipstick anymore. So I can't have a hole in the pan where it's dumping pressure out the side. So we've got a nice little plug here that's going to get welded in that will block off the dipstick hole. Because you don't need a dipstick in a dry sump pan. Not doing a thing for you. So all of that should get me to the next stage. And when you see this pan again, it will be modified and it will be ready to go back in the car for now. Also, while the pan is off, there's a very high likelihood of be putting the new camshaft in the engine. And Dickey Racing Products Stage 2 cam, new lifters, new valve springs, all of that will be going in the engine when it's back out of the car. So when this all goes back in, it's time to start on the motor mounts. And that will be the subject of the next video. So hang tight. When I come back here on this video, we'll have this pan back and I'll give you a good look at what we ended up with. All right. Well, welcome back everybody. What has been mere moments for you has been a week for me. In the meantime, the air conditioning in the shop is fixed, hooray, and the oil pan is back from the fabricator. It's all mortified and everything is done to it, so let me show you what we've got. Remove the windage tray. And as you can see, it's not as big as it was. A lot of work has been done. So the first thing is, I needed to have this back section cut and channeled in here for room for the power steering rack to go through here. And as you can see, that's been done. We kept the back section as mentioned because the engine adapter plate bolts here and we want that strength. But the steering will fit right down in that area. It drops down a little bit and then goes forward flat all the way. The level of this is determined by the oil filter mounting point. That's right here. So that's how everything was milled to that level. Inside the pan, you can see the crossover here for the oil filter from the factory. The tray comes up right underneath it here. This is the back of the pan. And the oil is going to be sloshing around in this area in here. So that's the lowest part of the pan, kind of a mid-sump. Because of that, oil will run off of this and will run back and forth in here. Being as it's not a drag racer and I'm going to be going left and right and gas and brake, the pickup points are up here towards the front. Kind of like a front sump pan, but we're back and forth on it. It's not a problem. These pickup points right here that were welded in will be where the oil is picked up and drawn back to the dry sump pump. So all of this has been sealed up, welded on both sides very nicely. The return point right here has been added, and it's kicked a little bit off so you can weld around the back side. This has all been ported and cleaned up very nicely. So this is where the oil comes back into the original pump. And this looks really sweet. Did a very nice job. Professional welding. Very pleased with it. So as you can see, we've gotten rid of a lot. And I needed to get this done so I could do the cross member next for the motor mounts. That'll be the next thing to be done. In the meantime, the oil dipstick plug is filled. The level sensor is plugged, and this pan is ready to go. So what I will do is go ahead and stick it up under the car with a couple of bolts and show you what things look like under there. And as you can see, Christmas has arrived. More goodies have come in. So we have a stage 2 cam that's going to go in that motor before this all gets buttoned back up, along with a variable valve timing lockout as recommended by Skog & Dickey. And things are moving along. So wonderful progress. We'll put that up under the car and show you what we've got. So things look a lot different here now, don't they? All this nice flat space here. We're not hanging down. The pan's not way down here where it was. A lot more room. I'm almost even with the bottom of the radiator bulkhead support here, very close to that. So I've got as much clearance as I can get. The oil filter adapter is going to go right here. And the cross member for the motor mounts is going to go right here. So right through this area. Here's our ICT billet motor mounts, as you can see. We've got these ears on them, universal. They're going to swing out about like that. And there'll be a bar that comes down from the frame, across under here, and up over here. That's the next part of the project. As you can see, the steering rack is tucked up in that area where it's going to be. These tabs are just holding it in place for mock-up. But you can see how that tucks that up. The bottom of the rack is not below the bottom of the adapter plate, bottom of the transmission. Everything is pretty even. The cross member will be there. So the skid plate will be able to mount right through this area and protect everything from the front right back there. There will also be a bar connecting these two lower control arm mounts right through this area behind the adapter plate. Reinforce that and tie those back together. And then the front side of it, a lot of this is going to go away. And I'm deciding if I'm going to go ahead and run a bar from here to the motor mount bar or what to tie it all together. But it will all get tied together. So that's the idea. Here's the return back to the factory oil pump. My two outlets here to go to the dry sump pump, which is going to sit right about here. And that gives me lots more ground clearance. Everything's tucked up now. Way better. These arms here, the outer tie rods, are going to go way up in here. With this out of the way, they're going to sit right up above at the original height where they were, so I don't change the steering angle. There'll be adapters to go from here up to there. That'll tie that all together, billet parts on both sides. So that should take care of that as well. So a lot of progress, looks much better, a lot more room. The next installment, chapter, will be doing the motor mount bar, tying it into the frame up there, welding it all in and tying in the motor mounts and getting this all installed. So we should get a little closer, and then after that, it's on to the steering. So that's the next steps, working away at it. And as you can see, we got progress. Very nice work. I appreciate my friend Brad and Stella Enterprises for doing some really nice welding. Great work. Don't have to worry about it leaking. Love it.